principles of metadata and data structuring. We look forward to continuing the presentations and discussion today, which will focus on practical applications and innovations. I'd also like to thank you all for your interest in these sessions and give a big thanks to SLGO for leading us through this data management training. And with that, I will hand things back to SLGO to get us started today. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, everyone. Bonjour. Bienvenue à la deuxième journée. Welcome to the second day of the workshop. So a reminder that the workshop is recorded. Also, we will be sharing the slide of yesterday and today, probably next week. The slide will be shared in French and in English. The workshop is in English and you can activate the translation in your Zoom. Donc, dans la section sous-titres, en bas du Zoom, si vous cliquez dessus, vous pouvez activer la langue parlée, donc l'anglais, puis la traduction en français pour avoir la transcription en direct. Si vous avez quelconque problème ou issue avec le Zoom, dites-nous dans le chat, on essaiera de vous aider. And if you have any issue with the Zoom, tell us in the chat. We will try to help you with that. So today we'll dig a bit more deeper in data management. So first part will be focus on the Darwin Core standard that will be given by Jeremy. Then we will go on the value of data dissemination and valorization with Antoine. And then we'll have an overview of how we are using AI in our data management at SLGO. Sorry. So it will be given by Juliette. Sorry. And then after the break, we will have a session about sensitive data and how do we manage to share sensitive data when some information should not be shared. And it will be given by Juliette. I think I've said everything. So if you have questions, please tell us in the chat. We will have a period at the end of the day to answer them and open discussion about whatever you want to talk about data management. A question can be in French or in English. And with that, I think it's Jeremy who will start with introduction to the Darwin Core.
Well, thank you, Mathilde. So welcome back, everyone. If you remember correctly, yesterday I said that here at SLGO, we use the Darwin Core standard to when it comes to publishing biodiversity data. So I'm going to start with this topic and for maybe 20-30 minutes, and then I'll give the mic to my colleague Antoine for him to speak, I guess, until the break. So the Darwin Core standard, it's a standard that's widely used. It's the, well, actually most used standard to share marine biological data. Many national and international initiatives are using it. So if you are already using this standard, it makes it easier and faster to share your data worldly, if that's what you're aiming for. It's a format made for integration. It allows to join in the same data set information on species and associated environmental data. I'll show you later on how it can be done. It eases the access to species observations. It's a standard that makes data from many different sources easy to find, share, and use in digital format. And it's also a solution to heterogeneity in sources. It helps to harmonize data that is often varied but crucial to understanding biodiversity. So when you have many organisms and many people and groups that are taking data and compiling it. Sometimes it's in different format though. So if we all use the Darwin Core standard, it's easier to just join all of this information inside a single file, for example. So the way it works is it's a set of a couple of files that are interconnected. So inside a zip file. So you'll have a main file that we often call the event core. I'll come back a bit later on what's an event, because sometimes it can also be an occurrence core. But just remember, know that you have a main file with extension files that will complement the information inside your main file. And the way it works is with unique identification codes that you can create yourself, or that we can do as well if you share your data with us. And this zip file is also joined with two XML files, one describing the structure and connection between the files, so between the core and the extension, and another one containing all the metadata. So it then creates in a zip file what we call the Darwin Core archive, and that's what you'll find if you go online to maybe on the OBIS platform, or even on our catalog, you'll find the Darwin Core archive. So as I mentioned, we use identification IDs to join the different file together. So when we say, when we're speaking about events, you can think of it as like when you go out on the field. Like, for example, if you're doing fish samplings, and maybe you go on a boat for the day and you stop at like 3 different locations at 3 different times during the day, and you catch a bunch of fish. Well, every time you stop to catch fish, it's a different event, because each one of these events will have a different location, a different time. So those are like unique. So this will create your event file, and you'll only put information on the location, the time, and maybe sometimes you can also add information on the environment around the site where you went fishing. So for example, temperature and things like that, although it will go in another file that I'll explain as well a bit later. So these are the events. And when we talk about occurrences, it's more like what are the species that you observed or caught. So again, if you went fishing and you caught maybe 150 fish from 5 different species, then there's like 2 schools of thought. Maybe you could consider it as 5 different occurrences, each with different number of individuals for each occurrence. But you can also see it as 150 occurrences, and each one of the fish that you caught will be its own occurrence. I wouldn't say there's one that's better than the other, but personally, I think that going by species for occurrences is a little bit better, because then you can just describe each species as one occurrence and have the number that you got for each of them as your count variable, like we saw yesterday when you're doing your file, your table. So it kind of looks a bit like this. You'll have your event table. So for example, here I have the event S123 that happened on March 22nd, 2012, sorry. And during this event, I caught 2 species, so 2 occurrences, and I gave them the IDs 0321 and 0322, and both happened during the event S123. So just now you can see that the occurrences are linked to an event. So we know that these 2 occurrences happened on April 22nd, no, sorry, March 22nd, 2012. So we don't need to repeat the date inside our occurrence table. And we have here the scientific name to show which species it was. But then I can also have a third table that we call the EMOF table, and EMOF stands for extended measurement or fact. So those are measurements that you'll take either during the event, so mostly like environmental data. Here we have the temperature, for example, or it can also be measurement you made on the occurrences. So for example, the length of the fish that you caught. So again, I repeat the event ID column with S123. And during that event, I took the temperature with the value of 25. And then probably you would have the measurement unit column and with the value Celsius, for example. And during the same event, I also took a measurement on my occurrence 0321. So Stomia boa that I had here. And I measured the length, which had a value of 15, and again, probably in millimeter or centimeter. So that's kind of how all the files in your Darwin Core archive are linked together. So you'll have the core event table, and then the extension occurrence table and EMOF table. Again, it can kind of look like that. And here it's a good example because you can see that some informations are repeated in each file, but using the Darwin Core standard makes it so that you don't have to repeat all this information. So again, the first that's a red table is my event table. So I have my event IDs, some dates, locations, my longitude and latitude, and other information about the place that I was or that I took at the time, some environmental data. And during the first event, I caught different species, each with a different occurrence ID. So you can see here that I don't really need to repeat the date, location, latitude, and longitude because those are already present in my event table on the first line. So I wouldn't have to repeat those information. I could just start with the scientific name and then the scientific name ID, the count, and some other information on my observation, on my occurrences. And then in my third table, the yellow EMOF table, for example, I have some information on my fourth occurrence. So here I repeat my occurrence ID to link both files. And so once again, the date and coordinates and even quadrant aren't really necessary in this file because I already know that those measurements were taken on this occurrence. I know that this occurrence is also this species here, so Mia arenaria, which again, I don't really need to repeat the common name, scientific name, and scientific name ID in my EMOF table because I know that this occurrence ID is linked to this line in my occurrence table with all the information on the species. And again, those measurements taken on this species happen on this event. So again, I have all the information about the place and time that the species was caught and the measurement were taken. So as you can see, that there's some information that can be left out of some of the files. So although I will still mention that it's not the perfect standard, I would say. It works very well for sharing information, but if you want to take some information, some data in a Darwin Core standard online, like for example, on our catalog or on OBIS, it's more machine-friendly than human-friendly. It's not a super good format for analysis. So what I can suggest is that you still keep the environmental data with your event in your event tables, and the measurement on your species could still go in your occurrence table, or maybe still in another file, another table. So yeah, like it's the shape your data will have if you share them with us, but we don't really recommend that you reach that standard. Like, you can still take some things that you like about this format. Like I said, you could have like a separate table for your occurrences, but you don't need to repeat the date and location, because you could join an event ID in your occurrence table, which relates to another table that you could have in like a separate tab in your Excel file. So the place and time are still linked to all of your occurrences. And when you're creating a unique identifier, you can pick one that that's a bit more speaking. Like in the first example I gave, S123, or for occurrences 0321. It doesn't really tell you a lot, and it can be a bit generic. So in the vast number of IDs that are online, you might come across another one that will be the same, and this can create problems. So try to make it as unique as possible. And for that, you can use information that's already in your file. So for example, here, my occurrence ID was created by using the concatenate formula in Excel. So basically, you're telling Excel to pick the value from a column and combine it with the values from another column, and to separate them with a symbol that you prefer. So for example, here I pick the institution code, hyphen year, hyphen mission number, underscore field number, underscore, and individual number. So it created this ID, which again was created from columns that were already present in my file. So this way you can create events that speak a little bit more, and you could also just create a small code representing each species that you have, and instead, for example, of the individual number, it could be something that refers a bit more to the name of the species, so you can identify what this ID refers to. So all this information, as well as the one that we gave yesterday, is also inside our data management guide that you can find on the SciU's website. It's not like a PDF that you just download and you're not aware of any changes that we might make. It's still it's in continuous development. So whenever we're doing some updates, there will be it will be noted somewhere, so you can stay up to date by using this management guide. So yeah, that's about it for me. Leave you with Antoine.
So now it's data dissemination section. Guys are switching places, so okay, it was fast.
Hi everyone. Now let's dig a little bit on the data dissemination and valorization subject. So now, okay. Now let's say we respect all the information we already talk about, and we work together to publish your data. But your data is standardized and published. So if we come back to the FAIR principle, it should be findable, accessible, and interoperable. Sorry for that. But if we And here I will focus on the fourth principle, third principle. It's the reusability. So now that your data is published, we want to be sure that their potential to be reusable is there. So in other words, we want to be sure that you, or any user can use the data that has been published. And to do that, it's really important to have the right tools to select and understand what's the data and how I can reuse it. So I would propose to see a little bit what's the SLGO toolbox in this matter. So, and to examine some of our tools. So let's start with the first one, that is the data catalog. It's at the core of our work of the SLGO website. And if you want to find a dataset in here, there is mainly on this page two main options. The first one is the classic one. We use a search bar where you can enter some keywords that will look for match between all the metadata that are present for datasets and the keywords that you enter. It's a classic one. And but there is a second option that is to use essential ocean variables. Let's call them EOV in the future. So what are the EOV? Mainly, Juliette already speak a little bit about it, but it's some master keywords that are globally used in the oceanography domain, and that have been selected and defined in detail by the Global Ocean Observing System, the GOES. And they describe essential variables that we use in oceanography. So let's say, for example, you want information about oxygen or in a dataset. If you select the EOV dissolved oxygen, you will find every dataset that contains oxygen information, even if it's not the main topic of the dataset. And it's very powerful because those keywords are, as I say, are really well defined with a scope that is very precise. So when we create the dataset, the author of the dataset will try to select the keywords that match the best with the dataset. And after that, because it's so detailed, the data scientists will be able to check if it's the correct EOV that is selected, can propose other one, and so you have some keywords that are really controlled, and you are really sure that they really describe the datasets. And because it's really important, Juliette will speak about it a little bit later, but we develop tools to help us refine a little bit more the selection of those datasets for every dataset that we have in our catalogs. So if I just go to the website, you have those two options here on the main page of the catalog with the keyboard and every ocean variable that are separate by domain. So bioecosystemic, biogeochemical, cross-disciplinary, or physical domain. So, sorry, okay. Now, let's see, you have made you have try to search with a search bar, or you are select an EOVs, or you want to just see all the datasets that we have in our catalog by clicking here in this button, in this menu, you will land on this page. So the main part of this page is the list of all the datasets that have been found. But here in the left column, you have a third option to filter, to select datasets that allows you to build your own advanced file filters with many different options list here. So you can, for example, try search only datasets that with extents that intersect a polygon that you can create directly on the map. You can select the dataset according to time, just so type of resource, type of format of resource as well. You can search with generic keywords and the EOVs that we already described. You can select some projects. For example, here, if you want to just have the CBP datasets, you can click here, and as it's displayed here, you will have the 70 datasets that are available on SLGO. And that's what's very powerful with this advanced filter. It's the filters are cumulative, so you can search a polygon in a project, and after that make research with the search bar, and you can then refine your search a little bit. The last option to search on the catalog is, imagine you are an organization and you want only the dataset of your organization, or you know an organization that have published a dataset but you don't have exact detail. You can click here on the organization menu to search just by organization. So you will land on this page here with the list of every organization that have published datasets on the SLGO catalog. And you can navigate the page or do a quick research in the search bar. And for example, if you select here the Comité ZIP Gaspésie, you will land on a page like this, but only with the 10 datasets that have been published by this organization. So now that you imagine we have selected certain datasets that can be interesting, but we want to be sure that we can use it and to understand it. So if we click on one dataset, for example, you will arrive on a page like this. This page are already as always construct on the same pattern. So on the left side, you will have the publishing organization tag with the name, logo, description, and a link to their website. And on the main part of this page here, you will have all the global information that we have on the dataset to allow you to better understand what's in the data that you can download. So first you have the title of the dataset, and then the permanent identifier here is DOE that will refer to the main page of the dataset. If it's a DOE that has been created by SLGO, it's mainly referred to this page. After that, you have descriptive abstract of the dataset, and I will insist on the descriptive part because it's a little bit different that's what we are used to for a research article, for example, because there is not or very little interpretation or discussion about the data. It's really focused on what's in the data set, what are the processes that can have been used to treat the data, when data have been collected, where it has been collected, and a little bit of context of why. So in an ideal world, just with this abstract, you should be able to understand, visualize what's the data set will contain. After that, you have a really important piece for the reusability side of the FAIR principle. That is the license. So it will include all the information that's the way that you can use the dataset. So let's say you want to play with this data. It's like the rule book of this game. So the SLGO propose a lot of different licenses that can be applied to a dataset. The most common one that we use is the Creative Commons Attribution 4. It's basically the same that a lot of research articles use. So that means that you can use the dataset in your research, but you have to cite this page, the dataset. And to help you with that, here, at the bottom of my screenshot here, you have the formatted citation that you have to use just in your paper or other thing if you use this dataset. After the core of the data that many people just want, it's the data itself, the resources. It can be just one researcher or many of them. So you will have the type of the format of the resources. So if it's a zip file, a link, HTML, a CSV, a PDF. And to be sure that you download what you want to download, each of these resources have a small title and a really short description just to ensure that to understand what's the resource about. After that, if you will scroll down a little, you will have the keywords that are associated to the dataset and a direct visualization of the spatial extent of the data. After that, you have some toggle menus with, for example, a relevant date when the data has been published, if there has been an update at the moment. Other menu where you can access to the XML file, metadata as XML file. So basically, it's a file that is not really human-friendly reading kind of file, but if it's structured as an ISO 19115 structure. So your computer will love it if you want to just automatically extract metadata for datasets, or if you want to harvest a lot of different datasets automatically. The next section is the contacts. Here you will have all the persons that have been that are linked to the dataset with the name, their affiliation, contacts, and very importantly, their role, what they have, what they do with these datasets. You can see that the number of contacts can be greater than the persons that appear in the citation. It's because the author choose which contact will be present in the citation, but here you can really contact person because of the role. If you have a question on the transformation, you can contact the person that process the data or so on. And you will have here a point of contact, for example, to be sure to contact the good person. After that, here you have additional info that if there is other information that you don't already have here, it will open an other table where you can see some information about the spatial extent of the data sets. The status is this data set finished, completed, or are there updates that can happen in the future? You have the EOVs, there's the projects, for example. So now you can select directly in the catalog datasets that interest you, and you can understand. But if you are a little bit like me, that you want to visualize spatially where the dataset are to be able to select it, we will have another tool that is the catalog map. I didn't precise, but when you will have the PDF, the slides, the blue box here are a direct link to each of the tools that I'm presenting. So let's dig a little bit with the catalog map and the one that is that have been made for the CBP program. So here you have the map with that is a bilingual map. You can see it or in French or in English. You will have some information shortly about the CBP. And if I come back on the map here, on the main part of the map, you can just easily navigate between the data sets. On the left side here, you have a list of all the data sets that are present in the map, in the CBP program here. So, and you can make a search or apply some filter with here's the search bar, and here other specific filter like the organization. Maybe you want DFO, just the DFO dataset, so it will text here, and in the dataset list you are only the datasets that are being published by DFO, or you want to select a project because some dataset of included in the CBP can be included in other projects. You can make a search by EOVs or according to time, for example. So if we go, for example, here, when you pass your mouse on on a point, the extent of the dataset will appear. And if you click on it, or if you directly just click on a dataset on the list, you will have another panel that will open with basically all the information that are present in the catalog page that I just presented you before, with information about the organization, the license, description, and direct link to the different resources and the citation. So come back here. I said, what I present you is the computer version of this app, but it can be used on also on mobile and tablets. And it has been constructed and optimized to be able to do basically the same thing on both modes. So you will also have access to directly to the resources. Now, with those two tools, we will search for entire dataset, for global datasets, but we don't look so much about the data itself, because the resource can be CSV or other formats, but for physical, geochemical, or geological data sets, we use an other tool to easily navigate in the resource itself, that is AirDAP. So I don't know if you are already familiar with AirDAP, but quickly, it's a free and open tool that has been developed and maintained by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administrations in NOAA, and that has a great advantage to be a tool that is commonly used by many organizations around the world. So at SLGO, we have an SLGO AirDAP server that is host in Canada with data that is managed by SLGO itself. And where you can do a lot of things that I will describe just now. So here is the main page of AirDAP, but you mainly never see it because when you click on the resource, you will directly be landed on the dataset page itself. So let's be honest, it's not really appealing right there like that, but it allows you to do a lot of stuff, to explore in depth really the datasets and to use it really efficiently. So if I just show you the different option here, you can have here the different variables that are included in the datasets, and you can just add some filters or create subset. For example, if you want just data point where the practical sanity is greater than 20, you just enter here 20, and you just will only have the matching data point that will appear. And mainly, it supports a lot of different formats. So maybe you want to use it as like a CSV file or Parquet file, NetCDF file. You can export the dataset in the format that you want. And it supports a lot of different file formats. So if you want to just explore it before to download it or to use it, you can just select the HTML table format and click on Submit. And if you do that, you will have an overview here of the dataset itself on an HTML page, or that you can explore. Or you can here go on the metadata tab here, okay, here, to have all the information that we have on the dataset itself. So that's the global metadata that will describe who's the author of this dataset, geospatial extent, history, different instruments that has been used, keywords, title, and so on. And you will have metadata about the variable itself with its units, instruments that have been used, a small description, and that's really important, a standard name. Standard name that in AirDAP follow the CF convention mainly. So, and it's allowed to compare different data sets and to be sure that if you want to compare temperature in one data set and temperature in another data set, if they have the same standard name, you will be sure to compare the same kind of temperature. Is not the best example for it, but for example, say pH. If you want to, there is a standard for pH in NBS scale or for total scale. You want to be sure to compare the same thing. Because there is a standard name that is different, for both, you will be sure to not compare apple with orange or kind of thing. So now you can access the data, you can understand the data, but in ADAP you can also directly visualize some aspect of the data with the make of graph here tool. When you click on this button, you will land on a page, a menu like this, where you can choose what appears as an x-axis, y-axis, which variable will define the color of the point. You can make some subsets, some filters, and some managing of graphical aesthetics of the graph. If you select, for example, latitude and longitude, you will have a map where each point is displayed, or you can just select some other variable to create a graph. As for the dataset itself, you can download this image in a multiple in various formats, like PNG, for example, and both for the exports, dataset exports, and for image, you can generate some URL that allow you that you can share with other people or use on your script. I will come back to that later, and that will have that will be direct to this dataset in particular with all the filters that you put in place. So here I present mainly some structured datasets in table form. It can be datasets for boys, core sample, or profile, something like that. But ADAP also can also manage georeference raster dataset and present, for example, satellite image, climate model. So it's basically the same interface, but when you will make a graph, explore graphically the dataset, you will have here the datasets that appear as a raster surface. Here, now you can access the dataset, you can generate the URL, and I said that you can use it on the script. Like it exists direct some package, like if you use R, it's the ADAP package. If you use Python, it's the ADAP package. And a big advantage to not go on ADAP and download data, mainly first, you don't have to use the interface of ADAP, but also you will be able to work directly on the raw dataset. If you remember yesterday, we told you about it's important to maintain a raw datasets file in order to not put an error to it. By using ADAP directly with the different packages, you will use the raw dataset, and most importantly, the last version of the dataset. If there is an update, you don't have to come back to ADAP and download it again, re-importing it in your script. It will be automatics, and you keep a trace of every process that you apply to the dataset in your script, and you don't have to store multiple files locally on your computer. So you basically minimize the risk of error in Cascade. Here it's so using ADAP in script is one way to use ADAP. Another, it's an other tool that we have at SLGO, that is the SIUS Data Explorer tool. So basically it will display all the data points that are present on the RDAP server, but not only the SLGO server, but all the RDAP server of the Soyuz. So that's why you have here a lot of different points. If you zoom in a little bit here, you can see each point, each green point here or orange point is a data, and it's not you don't look dataset individually, but globally each point of every dataset that we have on our different RDAP servers. As for the catalog, you can add some filters looking only for some EOVs, time periods, specific depth, type of platform, by organization, looking for dataset itself. So if I just navigate here. Oh, sorry. No. Oh, I did not open. Well, sorry for that. But if you click on a point, you will obtain different metadata that are present in the metadata page on RDAP that I show you. And you can access some visualization tool directly, like display the data, the entire dataset as a table, or you can do some different graph by choosing the X and Y axis. So here it combines the graphic exploration of RDAP, but with a spatial search of each point on a map. So for other type of resources, because here we really speak about physics, geochemical and geological data, and other exceptions that we can put on RDAP too. But for other file, like for example, if you have that collection of data, it can be a shapefile, TIFF file, some reports, or some auxiliary files that you want to add as a resource. And other tools that we have at SLGO is to allow you to share it in web accessible folders, WAF for short. Basically here in the resource, it's a collection of reports that we have that is linked to an HTML page, WAF, that present like this. So you will land on a page where there is the different directory with hierarchy that is respected relatively to what's the content of the WAF. For example, here your collection of reports, collection of TIFF, collection of folders, and in each folder there is a collection of shapefile. So it's very powerful because you can do a little bit all that you want to share data in a structure or file organization structure that you want. So if I summarize a little bit, I present you different tools, but the first two tools allow you to search the general dataset page. It's the SLGO catalog page, data catalog, and the catalog map. And the structure tool allow you to dive in a little bit more to explore the dataset itself. But as I said, CDE is mainly use RDAP data, so you will only find geochemistry, geology, and physics in it. But for the biological diversity data sets, other structures already provide some useful tools. I don't present it here, like for example, the MOBIS mapper. Yeah. All those tools are publicly available for every user of the SLGO catalog. And we have internally some internal tool to better manage our data integration that Juliet will speak about just now, I think. Yes. I'll stop sharing screen.
We can't hear you, Juliet.
Voilà. Sorry, I start sharing my screen, and now to follow up with Antoine, and for a little bit just before the break, I'll give you a little peek under the curtains on how we process data that's sent to us with an overview of our AI tools. So as in every use that we make of artificial intelligence, we always started with some kind of problem that was presenting to us. So the first one I want to present is called the Grand Extracteur, the Great Extractor. And it started with the need to extract data from gray literature. So I give you an example here. It is estimated that about 80% of information in biodiversity is hidden in that gray literature. So that includes reports, thesis, documents, but basically in PDF that are mostly unstructured and invisible because very hard to systematically use because it's not standardized as using Darwin Core or other kinds of international standard. And so that was the problem that was presented to us. And we it was really time consuming and difficult for the data scientist team internally at SLGO to find ways to extract all the information content, and which is usually very interesting and data, but often hidden. And so in collaboration between our development team and our data team, we are looking to extract first of all the metadata. So the usual suspect, the time, all those kind of things that we presented as metadata, but also essential ocean variable. You've heard that word many times over the last 2 days. So those are those very important variable to observe change and monitor change in the Earth system. And again, they are interoperable with other systems, OBIS, GBIF, and so on. And so allowing to extract that data would makes those reports well characterized, and in the end up in the hands of the right user. So people who are looking for information about, I don't know, fish abundance, they find the right kind of report, kind of PDF that they're looking for that are going to tell them about fish abundance in this case, or the presence of marine turtles and so on. Ultimately, what we would like to do is to be able to extract tabular data as well from those from this gray literature, but that's still a work in progress. As you might know, AI has evolved quite a lot over the last few years and even months. And so the work we've been doing that was partly financed by the Ocean Supercluster, OSC, has been changing a lot because of those evolution. This slide is there to give you kind of an overview of the steps. So basically, we enter a text file, a PDF, a report. There's a prompt that we came up with in collaboration between teams. This is then sent to a LLM, large language model, and the output is catalog ready in a JSON file, meaning that it is also compatible with the metadata entry form that we presented yesterday. And so to come up with those steps, and especially the prompt, there was a lot of back and forth between the development team and the data team. So the data scientist and the data integrator at SLGO had to kind of spell out the system that they used before to extract those metadata manually from those text files. And on the other end, the development team had to translate that into a prompt that was meaningful and that could replicate that intellectual effort that previously was done by hand by the data team. This is an overview of the interface. So basically, we upload the data in the first step, then we extract it. It gives us a result as well as a confidence level, a justification, very important for that choice, a reference from the text that can be validated or not. We obviously get rid of the human review, so all the results that are coming out of this great extractor are validated or invalidated by the data team. And importantly, if someone in the team decides that this is not the right EUV, they have to justify why they select no. And this answer then feeds back to the model to improve it over and over again. Yeah. Another feature that we've developed is called the Great Validator. And a little bit in the same way, this helps us identify outliers. I think there was a question about that yesterday. So this is what I think Jeremy was talking about. This Great Validator is helping us identify outliers, geographical referencing errors, as well as propose a control vocabulary for a species name. Again, all this work was done by hand previously, and that's why we feel confident that in collaboration, both the data and development team could make a AI that was that could be trusted, because we had done that previously for many years. The last thing that this Great Validator does for us, or assist us to do, I should say, is to check for sensitive information. So again, we designed a prompt that was there to identify phone numbers as well as addresses and names that might not be for public viewing. So it's a little bit similar to the previous interface. We enter we import the file that we need to be checked, and it gives us an answer with identifying what should be filtered, might need to be filtered out. And again, this is verified by the data team. Because just as a reminder, once things are on our portal, it's accessible for public viewing, both by humans and machine. There's several impact and added value, but there was also risk to add artificial intelligence to our processes, and I just want to come back to that to conclude. So on one hand, it strengthens the FAIR principle. It improves the quality and interoperability of the data on our portals. It makes data visible that wasn't before. So all this gray literature that was hidden is more usable. Because it's mixed with the right EOVs, which wasn't the case necessarily before. It also removed personal information, so increase the quality and make it more shareable. and it frees up times for the data team to ingest more data into a process and to be assisted by this kind of AI. And but as we did that, we didn't want to shy away from the difficult question and ethical responsibility of using AI. So our coordination team, as well as the development team, did a ethical and legal review of the use of AI, especially in Europe and Canada. And we identified key conditions of the use of responsible AI: transparency, meaning that we share with our partners whether we're going to use AI and we respect the choices made. Understandably, we had some partners that were cautious about using AI to train our models, and we always respected those choices. Safety. Very importantly, explicability, meaning that the results that we get from our AI is not understandable. It's understandable by us as why we get those results. It's not kind of a black box. We also evaluated the human impact, both internally and externally, and we, as you saw in both example with the grade extractor and grade validator, we made sure to put emphasis on oversight by humans and feedback, so we could improve our model, but also make sure that it wasn't directly or automatically putting out results into the world. And so that's how we developed AI that we think is trusted, and we're moving to keep up with what other repositories are doing, our catalogs are doing, but also moving cautiously in this new kind of work environment. So I'll give the floor back to Omnain, and I'll come back after the break for a little talk about sensitive information and interviews.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliette and Antoine and Jérémy, for this first session in the. And so I don't know if anyone has any question before that we get to the break sessions. So you can raise your hand using the Zoom icon or write a question in the chat if there is any questions. If not, we're going to the break. I'm giving you just 10 seconds. Okay. So, like yesterday, we are going back from the break at 2:15 Eastern Time. This time we are saying it. Nous allons prendre une pause de 30 minutes, reprise à 2h30 de l'heure de l'Est. 14h15, pardon. Désolée. Donc 14h15 heure de l'Est. 2:15 Eastern Time. Thank you.
So welcome back. I hope everybody had a nice break. So for the last part of this training session, I'll discuss sensitive data, and I think we'll have time at the end. I'll give you a little primer on interview data. I don't know if any of you are using interviews in your research, but even for those who aren't, it might give you a little bit of an idea of how social science researchers deal with that kind of data. So just before I start, this part is really focused on research data. I'll go briefly over what are sensitive data, some example, and then I'll give some practical advice on how to handle sensitive data throughout the research process until it's possible to share it. So what is sensitive data? It's any data that requires protection from unauthorized access because its disclosure may cause harms. One thing that's important to remember here is that even though sensitive data is often associated with human or social group data, ecosystems can also produce sensitive data. And the fact that it might need protection for legal, ethical, privacy reasons, as well as environmental risk that can be associated with the share of the data. So the idea behind sensitive data is to do a balance between what we've been talking over for the last 2 days, opening the data, sharing the work that we've done as researcher, but also safety issues for people who shared their data with us. They might be human, non-human, or community. Why one would be reluctant to share data? First, it can contain confidential or proprietary information. We can think of trade secrets or things like that. Some data are only temporarily sensitive if it hasn't been published yet, for example, and you don't want someone to beat you to the punch. So to say, it can also contain compromising or classified information. We can think of national security issues and so on, especially when we're talking about research done in the Arctic, which is more and more hotspots for those kinds of information. And again, the risk may be present at the individual level, so harm to reputation and so on, or at the institutional or collective level. So if it endangers a species, for example, or an ecosystem, and we briefly mentioned yesterday OCAP and CARE principle, one has to be especially careful when dealing with data coming from First Nations. Here, I want to give you a few examples of what could be considered sensitive data. So if we're talking about endangered species, for example, their exact geographic location of where we made the observation can be sensitive. The temporal coverage of the survey, as it might indicate when a species is reproducing or so on. The precise identification of the specimen. And at the end of the part of the presentation, I'll come back to some ways in which we can generalize that to share our data anyway, but not risk further endangering species or ecosystems. Other data that might be sensitive are personal data. That's a little bit more what we're used to. Identifiers like name, addresses, date of birth. Also, one might think of economic, cultural, and social attributes. There's a whole list there and it's important here to keep in mind that it's not only the prime identifier like your name or even your social security number, but one could use some of those information to re-identify you. So if, for example, if someone lives on the street and he's the only male of a certain age, with adding all those information, one can find the identity of a person. So the more we increase the number of identifier, the easier it is to re-identify someone. And biomedical data, that's also a little bit more obvious, but human, animal, plants, genetic and physical characteristic can be sensitive as well. Why is this important? coming back to this kind of division between individual, collective, and institutional risk. At the individual level, one can fear discrimination or stigmatization for sharing some information. There can be emotional and psychological distress associated with knowing that your information is out there, your name, your address, your salary, so on. At the collective level, we're risking to endanger vulnerable species, habitat, also culturally significant sites of unwanted disclosure. And institutional risk are carried through legal and regulatory penalty that can be imposed in case of non-compliance for a researcher, for example. And ultimately, those culminate in a lack of trust in research. So the more researchers are unaware and don't apply the necessary protection to sensitive data, it risks losing trust in research on a more global level. So how do we determine the sensitivity of our data? Ultimately, this responsibility is held by the data producer, but there are several implications or factors to be considered in making that decision. The first one is, of course, if you're working with a participant in your research, it's the agreement you made with them on how their data would be used, shared, analyzed, and so on. The second factor to consider is the policy of your institution. So if you work for the government or a university, that might not be the same rules that apply. And finally, there's the importance of the legal framework in which we work here in Canada, for example. And it's important here to underline that Quebec has a very specific and more stringent law on personal information called Law 25. So you might want to look into that if you work out of Quebec. So again, I want to emphasize that this decision cannot be solely based on your decision that you want to share or withhold the data. It involves ethical and political and moral factors. So I mentioned that briefly, but again, sensitivity level may change after publication of the articles. Maybe the data is not as sensitive as it was prior to the publication. There's also a risk to the reputation that becomes lower as time passed. One can think of declassification of state secret after 50 or 100 years, depending on the case. Here we came up with a classification of sensitivity in research data. It's based on Compute Quebec table that they created a few years ago, I think, and it's adapted to the need of SLGO and our partners. But the idea is that sensitivity is not a binary choice between this is sensitive and this is not. It's more of a spectrum going from minimal risk, so the data can be open and shared relatively easily, to very high risk, where the data should not be shared under any circumstance. We can think here about national security data, genetic data, and this is the data where we should apply the more protection to. In between, we have two other levels, high, where again the data should be also protected. Here I put sampling site, the pre-publication data set, again not shareable. And in the second category, moderate, we see anonymized interview transcript. This could be an example of data sets, or we could think of tabular data once they've reach a level of generalization where it's no longer risky to share it through a portal like SLGO or others. Sensitivity data throughout the research cycle. So at the planning stage, we should ascertain that we have informed consent. So this applies particularly of research where we have human participants. This is harder to ask for from animals or plants or water. But at the planning stage, yeah, we should strive for informed consent. Of course, when we work with lands or water that are belong to First Nation, informed consent is also important in gathering the data and how we're going to collect it and so on. At the processing stage, it is advisable to anonymize or pseudonymize your data before analyzing it. And at the dissemination stage, it's important to think about issues like controlled access, partial dissemination, rather than just completely open data sharing practices. So I'll go through this stage now a little bit more on a practical level on how kind of tools you can use or strategies you can use to ensure that your data is safe or as safe as possible. So in terms of storage, it is recommended to use some kind of encryption, so encoding your data so that only members of your team who should have access to it have the proper description key and can access to it. Secure storage location, so using institutional server or certified cloud service that meet recognized security standards. And so usually the rule is 3 different location, 2 different formats, and two different location where your storage is stored. So if in an event of a flood or something like that, your data is secured. Control access mechanism. So again, just allowing access to those who need the data to carry their analysis or their work. In terms of analysis, I put 4 main strategies that one can use to desensitize, so to say, your data. The first one is aggregation. So this means providing summary value rather than individual ones. So one can think about sharing the median salary of a research group, for example, instead of individual ones. We can also generalize by reducing the precision of certain variable, and we'll see that on the next slide on how this can be done. We can use a polygon rather than the exact location of a certain observation, for example. Anonymization, this means removing all direct and indirect identifier and making it impossible to re-identify. This is the more stringent option. We also could use pseudonymization, mean replacing the identifier and keeping a key that can allow re-identification. This is sometimes necessary and justified if we need to recontact some of the participants later, for example. And here, Open Air Amnesia, the link that I put here is a link that enables anonymization on a larger scale of data sets that might be useful. 2 very important information I need to add to this slide is the fact that you should be systematic when you do this kind of work. So don't do the half of your data sets and leave the other half not generalized or not aggregated. You should keep a log of what you're doing so we can retrace your steps and you can know what was changed and how. Even though you're, for example, for anonymization, you're not keeping the previous identifier, you're still keeping a log of how this process was done. This is really important. You should also be careful of outliers because those, even when they are kept in the data set, they can be more easily identified. So if most of their observation were done in the Gulf and you have one that was done in the Arctic, it can be more easily identifiable what kind of species you observe in the Arctic rather than in the Gulf, and so on. And last thing, it's important while you're doing those steps that not to do them mindlessly, to keep all the information that's important to your analysis. I'll give you a little example. So if I'm interested in political attitude towards climate change and age, I'll keep the age variable because that's an important, that's the variable of interest of my research. While I can reduce the location where people that I interviewed are located or live. But if I'm interested in a difference between people living in urban area versus rural area in terms of their political attitude toward climate change, then this is the information I'm gonna keep precise, and I'm gonna generalize rather their age by putting them into larger category, 19 to 25, 26 to, and so on. And so it's really important to know while you're doing this kinds of modification to your data sets, what kind of question you're asking, and to think a little bit about how you're going about these processes. Here, so as I said, I'll give you a little example of what generalizing information on a data set about biodiversity can look like. So this is a tool from OBIS. We talked a little bit about OBIS over the last 2 days, but basically they offer what they call a WKT polygon, and it helps generalize where the species was found, and it kind of blurs the exact location of endangered species. This is how it would look in a table. So here I have the occurrence ID that I kept as is. The requirement for the ISO norm is only to have the year. So if the time of the year where you did your preservation is sensitive, you could generalize it to a whole year. The latitude and longitude have been replaced by this footprint WKT. The scientific name also have been changed. We changed the rank of the taxonomic rank, where we don't identify the exact species, but more their class. We didn't say the exact number of species we found. We put NA instead, really important, again, not to leave empty cells here, to put NAs. And we just noted whether the species was present or not. So in terms of sharing your sensitive data, there's a few things that one needs to be aware of. First, assessing the risk, both for your human and non-human participant, as well as the ecosystem, and respect the decision that were made by the participant. We might think that our data set is very important and very interesting to share, but those agreements are the foundation of doing research with human participants, and to encourage further participation in research. Be aware of the legal framework again, use ethical judgment, and here advise always to discuss this subject with peers. That might be very helpful to determine what's the best course of action, and adapting protection measure over time as data gets less or more sensitive. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that for sensitive data, and I'll do the little primer on interview. So what is an interview? An interview is basically a data collection method that seeks to gather information about experience, idea, behavior of individuals and groups. So let's say there's a limit to how much I can understand about a behavior by just observing it. At some point, I need to ask people why they are acting the way they are. We cannot know if people are going to respect fishing quota, for example, if we don't go ask them whether they're going to do it and why, if so. There's several types of interviews that have been used in social science mostly. They go from a more structure with predefined questions that are always asking the same way and that are easier to compare, to semi-structure where some specific questions are prepared, but it allows for more to explore emerging themes as the participant answers, and completely unstructured, which looks more like a free-flowing conversation with the idea to discuss one or two themes. And this is often used to collect medical history or history of activism and so on. And this is less comparable, of course, than structured interview where you ask always the same question, always in the same order, and so on. So during an interview, there's a few things to keep in mind. First, that one becomes good with practice. Usually one's first interview is not their best. It can be conducted in group or individually. It can be recorded or not. This is again coming back to the sensitive data we discussed just a few minutes ago. This is important to discuss that and to get the consent of the interviewee, whether they are going to be recorded or not, and what is going to be happening with that recording, whether it's going to be destroyed at the end of the study, whether it's going to be kept by the researcher. It usually happens in private. But there are some cases where a public interview is advisable, for example, when there's security issues at risk, and so on. And the most important thing is, and it can seem a little bit on the nose, but during an interview, one is there to listen and to gather the ideas, the thoughts, the perspective of the interviewee, and not to listen to one's own stream of thought. Again, coming back to what we discussed earlier, informed consent is a critical part of interviewing. It's the process by which the participant is asked in clear terms and provided clear information about the purpose of the study, its risk, its benefit. It's really important to emphasize that sharing is always can always involve some risk, and where they ask voluntarily to take part. Informed consent can ask for a written and signed document, but can also be done verbally, depending on the type of research we are conducting. Also, in some university, it's important to note that there are ethical boards, IRB boards, who will sometimes ask for written consent, but it really depends on the kind of rules and regulation of each university. It's also important when discussing informed consent that one gives their participants the opportunity to retract at any point from the study, either during the interview or even after, and that their data is going to be removed from the data sets if they choose to do so. Sometimes it can be important to keep a record of informed consent, even if done verbally, with the names and contact of people, to come back to them if, for example, one needs to get their approval for a secondary use of the data, and so on. So the object of the interview goes through phase through the research process. The first one is the physical object or digital one of the recording or interview note if there was no recording. This is highly identifiable, usually, and should not be shared outside of people who need it for analysis. Usually it's destroyed at the end of the study. Again, it depends on the agreement made with the participant. Then this video or audio recording or this interview notes are transcribed into a original version. I'll go through the types of transcription in the next slide. It may require some formatting, especially if there's multiple transcriber. Transcription can then be anonymized, so we can remove all identifiable information. We have the obvious suspect like name, but we can also think about like the role that the person has in its company or in his department, the place where the interview took place, and those could all be generalized. So one doesn't need to say, I met at this such and such cafe down this street. One can say just a cafe in this city, and sometimes it's enough to give the context of the interview. Again, this process needs to be done very intentionally to keep the information that's important. For example, it can be really different to do an interview in a cafe rather than in the office where the colleagues might overhear, and so those information might be important to keep. That's for you as a researcher to decide. The last part is the version where that's going to be used for the analysis per se. Again, this we should only put the practice is only put the data once it's completely anonymized into that software, and then we're going to use that version to make all the modification that we need to conduct our analysis. So there's three main transcription styles that one can use. The first one is full verbatim one, where we include every word, every pause, every editation. If there's grammatical error, it's also going to be recorded. The next one is a textual verbatim, where we remove all this filler words and small repetition, and we focus on the main message. And the third one, which can be applied to either the textual or full, is the addition of all the textual elements and nonverbal languages. So I use my hands a lot. You would note that in the sociological verbatim, where if you don't do that, it wouldn't be necessarily put in the textual or full verbatim version. And where you also add the context of where you did your interview, your relationship with the participant, and so on, and even like the feeling you had about your interaction, and so on. Transcription. So that's the part where you basically listen to your interview, your audio version, and try to write every word or just the main message of the interview. So what was done when I was doing my PhD, now we've come a bit further from that, was to listen to the recording, often done with a pedal where you could stop and start the recording and type the words. Many of my colleagues now are used to dictate while listening to the recording. This can be done using Google Recorder or Notion, because sometimes there's a lot of, when you did your original interviews, there's a lot of parasite sounds that kind of hinder just dictating it. So if you use just a device to restate the word, it's going to appear more clearly, although the technology is getting better and better at this, as you can see, maybe if you use the caption yesterday or today. There's technical tools also for transcription. These have benefits, but also downsides in terms of sensitivity of your data. And so, especially since the audio version, again, is very identifiable, people have their way of speaking, their tone, the sound of their voice. This can be considered like identifiable information. What we recommend is the first one here, A-Train. Again, you could click on all of those. They're hyperlinks, and once you get the PDF of the presentation next week, you can explore those options. A-Train was developed by a researcher in Austria, if I'm not mistaken, and it offers a local server, and it's free of cost. And so in terms of safety of your data, I think that's the better option. Also, all the systems that are presented here are using OpenAI. And there's been recent research that came out showing that it could hallucinate and add some sentences or word to your transcript. So it's very important, if you use those technical tools, to listen again to your recording and make sure that everything is there and that there was no addition done by the AI to your recording. Okay, the last part of not the last part, but the next part of dealing with interview data is what we call interview coding. So once you have all your text that have been hopefully anonymized, you create what we call a code book that defines the use and the limit of each code. So a code basically is the tag you're going to put on either a sentence or a word or a paragraph or a whole page. That's also a choice one needs to make, where you can kind of identify the categories that are analytically relevant to your study. So in the example I put there, they created a code called Family First that identifies instances where people discuss the fact that a family is the most nurturing place to raise a child. And so each time they saw that kind of discussion or argument made, they underline it and apply the code. Importantly, one can make a connection between codes, and they can also be hierarchically related. So here, Family First is a level 1 code, but there might be child code that are level 2, 3, or 4, where we identify sub-part of this bigger code that's called Family First. It's important that the codebook is a living document where when one finds something interesting or that they didn't think when they created the codebook at the beginning, they add and recode when necessary parts where they didn't really code for those kind of things or saw those kind of argument being made. So this is also, you have an image of all the information that one might find in a code book about the list of code, their definition, when to use them, some example. This is especially useful to when there's multiple coders, because it's been found that different people with different ideas don't necessarily apply the same label to the same text because they don't read the same thing. So the more clear one can be in defining the code, the easier it is for multiple people to apply it in the same way and be systematic. It's also important if you're doing a single person research. because as I think Omnain said yesterday, we tend to forget. We think we're going to remember, but our memory is not as good as one thinks, and it's really important to be able to trace your step and log the kind of decision you make and whether you decided this should be used now or not, and so on. And so yeah, that's we talked a lot about metadata over the last 2 days, and for interviews, research using interviews, that's a really fundamental part of the metadata. Telling future user how the data was compiled and how the data was analyzed is really fundamental. There's 2 ways to create your codebook. The first one is a top-down, using a deductive reasoning. So you start from a theory or a general rule, and so you create your codebook based on the theoretical perspective you're trying to apply, and then you move towards specific codes that would attest or falsify that theory. Others are using a more bottom-up approach where you go through your corpus of text, so your interviews, you read them, and from there you're trying to find generality patterns that are repeated, and then draw more general hypothesis based on what was found in your empirical materials. In general, nobody is completely deductive or inductive. Most people use a kind of abductive, where it's a little bit in between. There is some theoretical perspective, but also the material is giving some kind of a new perspective on this theoretical perspective ideas. So there's many ways to do interview analysis. Here I'm presenting what's called libQDA. I think it exists in French and in English. It comes from Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec. It's based on other software that exist, but that are quite expensive, and that are licensed, while libQDA is open source. And the idea is basically to put all your corpus on that software, and to once you've labeled using your codebook the different parts of your text, you can see if some code overlap, so you see them at the same time. So when people discuss climate change, they discuss the importance of preserving the earth for the next generation, for example. So one could make an argument about this kind of link between perspective for the future and having children and attitude towards climate change. We can see the exclusion of 2 codes that never occur together. So again, people who don't consider climate change an important issue, but also their professional field as a link with that. So that kind of exclusion. One could also find causal or narrative inference, so the same story kind of repeating itself. And this is why the codebook is such an important step of the analysis, because by making a good codebook that really makes clear the kind of main theme that people are talking about in their interview, it can make those narrative and causal inference appear more clearly for the researcher. And it's really hard to see by just reading the text and not generalizing it in some fashion. There can also be dependencies, so if I see A, then B appears later in the text, and so on. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation for today. We're here for the next few minutes if you have questions about any of the things, even if you want to come back to what was said yesterday, we're very happy to answer.